Hi, welcome to A Conversation On. I'm Alison Petty, a mindset coach. And in this episode, I'm going to be conversing with my friend and my fellow coach, Andy Hall. So welcome, Andy. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. I really
You're
appreciate your time and coming and joining me for this conversation today.
very welcome.
So I'll get you to introduce yourself in a moment, but I just wanted to just say to everyone listening and watching that Andy was actually my first client, and I don't know that you know that.
I do now. You
Yeah,
didn't tell me that.
no, I had been coaching. No, sorry, I should say my first client. I've been coaching, but you were my first paying client.
Oh, wow.
Like properly, like paying clients. I'd done, I had been coaching, I'd been training and all that kind of stuff. But I think you knew I was fairly new to it at the time because we had that sort of conversation from my history and that. But yeah, we met networking and we had a discovery call and then we had a session together because you were going from being a mentor to a coach and just had a few blocks in your way, but you were good and off and good to go.
Yeah, I had a job. I was on the hamster wheel. So I had,
Yeah.
I had a job and it felt very comfortable having a job. So I decided to go all in, probably similar sort of time to you. I'd just gone all in as a coach, if
Mm.
you like. And there was a few blockers there that I needed to remove. That coaching session, you'd never have known. You've never known at all. It wouldn't have
Well,
made a difference if you told me that was your first paid session. I still would have gone, yeah, let's do this.
well, I remember also it was lovely because you taught me, you showed me worth as well. Because one of my things for those that know my story, going from a wheelchair to rock climbing to mindset coaching, and if anyone hasn't heard that story, they can check that out on my website or my podcast. But I had a label of volunteer on my forehead for many years because I lived on benefits for most of those years because I was very chronically ill, bedbound, and wheelchair and all that kind of stuff for years. And this was my first time setting up a business, and coaching, as we're going to talk about, was purpose for me. And I knew that at that time, or I was starting to learn that. We'll come into that in a moment. But yeah, I had a very strong identity of or label of volunteer, and I was really having to work through that. And I remember, as I said, I had been coaching and I had a few clients that I'd, started to sort of work with in a more sort of longer term. But you were like that first client that for me was like my proper, this is now a business. And I remember when I said my price to you, I'd had to do quite a lot of work for myself of like my worth and my value. And by that point, I knew what I could offer.
Yeah.
And I did feel very confident in that because I
Mm.
wouldn't have, been at that point by then. But it was like saying those words for the first time, and you were just like, "Yeah, cool. Like, when do we?" Like, you were literally, "Yeah, when do we book in?" And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, cool. Anyway, and then afterwards, like, I got off the call with you, and I FaceTimed my mum, and I was like, "Oh my God, mum, like somebody like thinks I'm worth coaching them."
Mm.
And I remember in that session, it was discovery call, but I always remember you picking up a bit of paper at the end of it and going, "I've already got so much value from this," and I
Mm.
was like, "Cool," and that gave me that confidence. So I'm grateful to you, and I wanted to tell you that. So thank you.
Oh, right back at you. Yeah, right back at you. Because elements from that coaching session are still used on a daily basis. So
Nice.
it's very powerful. And, that word value comes across very strong
Mm.
in many conversations that we have. What value do you add to other people? And I think in some respects, I'm very easy to coach because I get the value of coaching. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Some people, when I coach them, I go, "Oh, I'm not too sure what I'm looking for." I'm like, I know exactly what I need here. I need somebody to help me with this, and you're the person. And you did a great job. So I'm grateful to you as well.
Well, you were very ready, and you did know where you were going as well, and you knew what you needed and what you wanted. And yeah, it was awesome. It's like definitely as a first like proper session goes, as a business, feeling like this is now my actual business. It was like absolutely bam for me as
Mm.
well. So yeah, cool. Well, let's get on to our conversation today. So you've been on my mind since I started this podcast, this idea of having these conversations with people that I've met on my journey where I feel like I resonate in certain ways with them. And you have been one of those people that's been like, at some point, I really want to do this with Andy and have a conversation. And what would that be on for us? Like, what would we resonate on? And the word purpose kept coming up for me when I would think about you. Obviously, knowing your journey and how passionate you are,
Mm.
and the fact that we do very, very, we're both coaches now. I know you went from being a mentor to a coach. So this is what we both do now. And knowing what I do know of you, how much it means to you in your life,
Mm.
And then we had a conversation 6 months ago about that. And I said, what do you think about purpose? And you're like, yeah, let's talk about purpose. It's like, great.
Yeah, yeah, I
Because
agree.
it is one of those really important things. And I wrote to you in an email earlier, and I was saying about how I feel like it's one of those life's big questions in life, but also one of those big quests in life for many people as to, what is purpose? What does it mean for me? And if that person hasn't yet found it, how do I find it? So I'd like you just to, we'll come to it in a minute, but firstly, just tell everyone that's listening and watching about you, about what you do. Share your website as well, so people can, connect with you and look you up. And I'll put it in the show notes, and it'll come up on the screen. But for those that are listening, if you could just actually say the website as well and spell it out, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
But just chat about yourself for a moment and tell us what you do.
Oh yeah, that's that really uncomfortable part,
Yeah,
isn't it? When we have to talk about ourselves. You know how that feels.
do it.
Um, I hate labels. I really hate labels, but the ones I'm probably proudest of is husband, dad, friend. They're the most important ones as far as I'm concerned. People call me lots of things, mostly to my face, sometimes behind my back. I'm a coach. I'm an executive coach, leadership coach. I tend to coach people who are in business or have their own businesses, particularly those people who are in high pressure positions, who are on the verge of a breakdown. They're burning out and they've lost focus on their purpose, their vision of what life's all about, and they lose track of things. So the kind of feedback I get from people is to help them find not just their purpose, but to get balance, but also to find their voice. And that's something which comes across loud and clear now, that the feedback I've been getting over the last 12 months is that people are very comfortable saying things now because they're more comfortable with themselves. So find their purpose, find their voice, and find balance for the loved ones is what I do, is help people do that.
Amazing.
Other things what I do as well, we'll talk probably later about the things that we say to ourselves and call ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm getting comfortable with the word athlete now, after being a non-athlete, so which is quite interesting. So I'm a runner and a triathlete as well, but that's something which I would have cringed at the thought of using those words in the past. So that's something which is crucially important to me. I'm a podcaster as well. I don't call myself a business owner, even though in networking terms, probably call it a business. For me, it's about purpose, and I'm rewarded for living my purpose, and so I don't really call it a business. It's just what I do, and hopefully that impacts on people's lives. So is that the kind of long enough introduction? Did you want me to spell out Moderado, the name of
Yeah,
the
do that
business?
as well so people can connect with you. And we'll do it at the end as well. But just, yeah, so if people want to have a look you up now, yeah, go for it.
So the business name is Moderado, Moderado, moderado.co.uk. I've only just got the website working. I've been self-employed for about a year, and I've only just got the website up and running.
Yeah, well,
Get that?
you're playing the long game, maybe. So,
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I've not marketed at all. It's literally everything's word of mouth. Everybody's saying speak to my mate Andy.
yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
that's the ideal, man. Like, I remember you telling me that when we caught up 6 months ago or so, and that
Mm,
I was like, yeah, nice, and it doesn't surprise me. I mean, you're very active, you do a lot, you get out and about, and like, well, I can totally see how that would be happening. So
mm,
it doesn't surprise me at all.
thank you.
Where does Moderado come from? What's that about?
Um, so the word moderado is Spanish for imbalance or moderate.
Okay.
So in all things, moderation. So it's kind of a stoic virtue that
Mm,
things are balanced. I really like the Scandinavian word lagon, which is not too much, not too little, but just enough. And it
okay.
doesn't translate very well in English. I can't think of a word which means that. Not too much, not too little. It is about that balance, and
Mm,
so I think calling a business balance is a bit too vague. But what's in a word anyway? It's just
yeah.
it just means to me, I suppose in practice, what it means is getting the balance right between stress plus rest equals growth. Going so far out of your comfort zone that it doesn't hurt you too much, but it's enough to stretch you. It's that kind of thing is what I'm looking for. So that's what moderado means to me, but it probably means different things to different people.
Nice. Well, I was guessing it was something along those lines, and it's intriguing. It's actually a really beautiful word as well. When I've seen it on your like on LinkedIn or places around. It's like, it's just a really lovely looking word as well, but it's a very intriguing word.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get down to it and let's talk about purpose and what that is for us in its many shapes and forms. So, I was thinking as well, we talk about purpose, but there could be many purposes that we discover in our lives, or perhaps there's just one. And yeah, so really, I guess let's firstly talk about our experiences of perhaps when there was a time where we didn't know what our purpose was and how that felt. Because a lot of people will resonate with that. And I certainly, for well, until I started coaching, perhaps even around that time when I first coaching conversation with you, it was like, oh, okay, this is purpose. And I know from myself over my lifetime, I've had many passions, like, could be somebody, Harrison Ford, absolutely a passion, from 14-year-old, my 14-year-old self, like my one true love through my life. But yeah, like passions like that. Rock climbing, for me, anyone that knows me, when I was 14, 15, I fell in love with rock climbing. It all got put on hold while I went off and was ill for 24 years and the wheelchair and bed bound stuff. But I've been able to get back into that over these last 6 or 7, almost 7 years now, since I went through my health transformation. So I'm fully living my passion again, and many other passions, but I never knew what purpose was. And I was always aware of people talking about that. And I guess definitely as well, coming from the life that I was living, as I say, like in an 8-year relapse in my 20s to 30s, where I was predominantly bedbound, and all those kind of times over those years where I was living, but I wasn't living. Purpose seemed like very low down the list of things that I was going to be able to connect with and find in my life. There was always hope, but the tunnel ahead, or any kind of living a life, seemed a very long way off, let alone discovering things like that. So I feel incredibly grateful daily to wake up in the morning excited to do what I do. And as you talked about, it's not work what we do. Well, we don't see it like that. It's passion. I'm incredibly passionate about, I'm a massive NLP fangirl, as you know, and passionate about coaching, passionate about helping people, passionate about telling my story to spread that knowledge of what's possible when you harness your beautiful brain and magnificent mindset. But it is purpose. And that's, yeah. So what's your version of that?
I think there's two versions of everything. There's a really simple version and there's a very complicated version of things. So purpose for me is that we all have the same purpose. Ultimately, we don't have to think about this. It's just something that we feel. Purpose is when you know you're doing the right thing intrinsically. That's your purpose. And that could be something as simple as doing something kind for someone else, or finding the world a better place than or leaving the world a better place than you left it. Whether it's on a daily basis or on a weekly, monthly basis, when we're doing what we know is right, that is our purpose. That's a really simple version. From a life perspective, that is almost the meaning of life, because if we don't pass what we've learned on to the next generation, then we don't evolve as a race, if you like. So for me, purpose is doing what you intrinsically know is the right thing to do. You don't need to be taught this. I think it's something that comes from inside you. You don't have to think about it. It's what you feel. The more complicated version of that is things happen in your life that make you realize that that's what I should be doing right now, or this just feels so wrong, but I don't know why. And the more we get of those moments, it's almost like a jigsaw starts to getting a little bit clearer. I've just got the corner pieces in now, and I know that doesn't work, and this doesn't work here, but this definitely feels right. That connects just right. It's not necessarily my values, but it's my virtues, and those virtues really need to resonate with all of us, I think. And some of those key moments could be when you get your first job, or speak with your first client, have your first coaching session. You think this feels just the way it should do. Time stood still. I'm in my flow. For me, it was becoming a parent. That was a moment of this is purpose of life. Having coaching sessions, having a breakdown, and decided that I wanted to end my life are times when I look back and go, my purpose was speaking to me loud and clear. And part of that is we look too hard for our purpose. And I think we should just let our purpose happen, and we'll be in flow with it eventually. And that sounds a bit woo-woo, but for somebody who's a very pragmatic thinker, I know that to be the truth.
And what was it like? I mean, okay, well, when did you connect with this understanding? Let's say that, because I'm guessing there would have been a time where perhaps knowing the little of you that I know, that is obviously a very important thing for you
Mm,
to be living on purpose in whatever way that is for you. And fulfilling that, but there would have been a time where perhaps you weren't connected to that. And what was that like? Was that something that you were aware of that was missing? Were you one of those, like me, like, oh, what is that? What does that feel like? I keep hearing about people
mm,
talking about knowing their purpose or living their purpose or finding it. And then, God, that sounds amazing, but where's mine? Will I ever find it? Did
yeah.
you, did you experience that?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, quite a lot actually. I think certainly when we're younger, we guess what our purpose is, and often that purpose is, and I need to get a job, to be valued by others, and I need to find my place in the world. I need to find my people. But it's very much an extrinsic thing. It's very much we decide based on those people around us, our peers, if you like, where do we fit in, etc. So for me, it's probably, looking back, and this is almost like reverse engineering the word purpose. And I didn't really understand what the word purpose meant. Just didn't feel like I belonged in that school, for example, or that group of friends. I just didn't feel like I belonged with those, or the job that I had for so long, it just didn't feel like it was the right thing to do, and I fell out of love with it. There was a particular time when I was at my lowest point, or around about that period of time, I was at my lowest point. Took the kids to school. It was a church school. It's a small village school, not far from where we live. And things were just so bad. It was unbelievable. I remember when the kids left the church and went back into school. I just stayed in church, basically shouting at myself or to God, being like, for God's sake, tell me what I need to do, because it just doesn't feel right. And it's kind of an angry prayer, if you like, please just show me some signs, what is it? And I was looking so hard for purpose. I was getting angry with myself. And there's a phrase that the obstacle is the way, and that's kind of what it is. The things what were holding me back were actually my purpose. The things what were in my mind at that time were, is life worth living? Everything just seems to be financial. Why is that? The value that we have in our life is how much money do we have in the bank? What kind of car do we drive? Do we have a house, for example? How much money can I put in a will to my children? That's not living. And that's what it felt like. It felt like it was being measured on financial worth rather than worth as a human being. And that's my lowest points came to. And out of that, again, I say reverse engineering it, looking back, that's exactly what I should have been doing. I should have been challenging, asking those questions. What is my purpose in life? And I'll go back to that very same point. We overcomplicate things. We try too hard. We look too hard for things, and really they're right in front of us all the time. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And also just that, going to those real depths of human feelings and challenging life times where it feels really desperate and you're like, screaming out loud to some higher something, that's whatever that is for you, that when you then find your way, your purpose, whatever that is for you, that how more beautiful and more grateful you are for that, because yeah, it's like, you can't experience sunshine without the rain. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Never
yeah.
really get in
How,
that.
how do you describe it? So before you found your purpose, what was that like then, and how does that contrast to how it is now?
Yeah, I mean, the life before coaching even was, well, not so much coaching, although I kind of, for me, so I did again, for those that are just listening in that don't know my story, check it out, alisonpetty.com, and you can find out more about it. But just touching on that, because it's all it's all part of it. When I went from being 24 years of ME and fibromyalgia to the life I live now, that was through a particular NLP process called the lightning process, which that was my transformation. And it was, I was like reluctant to use the word game changer, but or hashtag game changer, but it was, and absolutely gave my life back in space beyond what I could ever possibly imagine was possible. So from the very first day of being on that course, there was a part of me that knew that coaching was going to be part of my life.
Mm,
Just on some deep unconscious level, I completely fell in love with neuroplasticity, NLP. I call myself an NLP fangirl. I'm an advanced master practitioner of it now. Like, I've gone from like, just experiencing it and it changing my life to now this is my life and what I do. This was always going to happen. You and I were always going to have this conversation at some point. I've got goosebumps now as I'm saying this. So much of what I talk about is so related to the experience of my transformation. I'm even getting a lump in my throat because it's like this was going to happen. We were going to be sitting there talking about this at some point. Sorry. I never get through any conversation with anyone these days without any kind of like welling of, but that is that thing that I just talked about though, like having gone to the really dark places and now it meaning so much to me, to be here in these conversations and coaching people and enabling their transformations and telling the story. So what was the question? So yeah, for me, it was always waiting. But I needed to go off and figure out who I was. I was, I think, 41 at that time. I'd just woken up. I was like, God, I'm well. I'm actually healthy. Who am I? What am I doing in my life? I need to go off and explore and find my feet in the world, learn how to like be in the world as a human that's healthy and, very different to the one I was before. So I went off and did that for, I went up to North Wales, bought a camper van. My dad converted it for me. I packed
so up. Cool.
Yeah,
it is so cool.
It is so cool.
When I grow up, I'm going to get a camper van.
Don't grow up. I'm not grown up. I still have the van now, but now I have a base and I have a home because I need that for my work so that I can coach. And as I was saying to you earlier, so I have a Wi-Fi that doesn't cut out because I'm in the middle of a field somewhere in my van. There's sort of grown up things now that I've had to bring in, but still have my van. And I will have it until it starts to really completely fall apart and won't start anymore. But yeah, I went off, did that, started rock climbing, went off on a massive like roller coaster of rock climbing adventures for a few years, worked for the Youth Hostel Association. So I didn't, which that was always on the cards if I ever got well enough, which meant I just had a paycheck, didn't have to think about anything, made a bunch of beds, checked guests in, went climbing in the afternoon, just lived my life and it was great. But for me, it was the pandemic hit and I'm trying to get through this bit without getting welled up. But can't do it. My dad unexpectedly passed away in the May of 2020. So just before vaccines, before any of that, and it was all unexpected. And I'm very close to my family. And my mum and dad, always are. My mum, still have my mum, is my best friend ever in my life. And and the idea of them departing was always that big thing hanging over through my life. And none of us expected any. We were all in that lockdown world, and no one knew what was going on, and suddenly he was gone. So for my entire family, that was absolutely a very traumatic experience on top of what it already would have been, just logistically with the restrictions and all of that. And anyway, that's another story. But out of that time, I ended up then having a proper experience of depression, which I would have experienced depression when I was ill for sure, but it was all mixed up with the illness, and I can't look back. And, of course, I was in an 8-year relapse once in my 20s or 30s, where there's no way I would have like gone through years of being bedbound without some form of depression or really not good feeling about life. But I experienced a healthy person's version of depression, of bereavement, and then some other things happened that just compounded it all. But out of that time, and I always remember it was the end of a bottle of wine one night. I was staying with a friend of mine because I was just staying with friends who were looking after me and taking me in during that time. We were in another lockdown. It was the first winter. It was the February of the first winter, the first lockdown, first year of COVID. And ended a bottle of wine one night. And we were, I was asking that question, like, what am I doing in my life? What am I doing? There's 24 years, not I didn't live them, but I didn't live them. I know I love my job, love working for the YHA, but I know there's more for me. Like there just is. I knew that on some deep level. And it was awesome. My brain just went, this is when you do that. And it wasn't like, oh, coaching. Okay, that could be fun. Like, well, maybe I could be good at that. That could be interesting. It was just like, this is when you do that. This is when you start your coaching and you make that your thing. And again, goosebumps, because I will never forget that moment. And that's what I mean. It was awesome. It was like, it's just been waiting And my brain was like,
Yeah.
now come on, like, you've had your fun, you'll still have your fun, you'll still get to climb, but now let's crack on. And at that moment, I didn't know that was what purpose was going to be.
Mm.
Next morning, I hadn't been getting out of bed before 2, 3 in the afternoon. You know, the depression was really deep. But the next morning, I remember waking up at 7, opened my laptop, started building my website. And it was months before I really started the business because I was finishing my old job. But then I started coaching. And then, yeah, it would have been around the time that you and I started that, when we did that session, and I was starting to
Mm.
take other clients on. There was others around you, but you were the first one. And it was like just that awareness of the difference between what passion is and purpose.
Mm.
Very, very
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's really interesting that not just you and I, but most people I speak with on this subject, we often refer to really dark times in our lives. The times when it couldn't get any darker, when you were really going, this just feels really unfair. What comes at the end of that is almost like an enlightenment. There's a moment as that, that light bulb happens, that it switches on, and it's a paradigm shift when you go, I get it now. That's why I had to suffer so much. That's what that pain was for, because sometimes we have to experience pain. And, you're the person to talk about pain more than anybody I know. What comes after that pain, when that pain goes, is I've just created some space now to actually do something. It makes sense. And, you know, putting labels on this complicates things, So for example, coaching, I'm a coach. I do that. I love it. I'm also a public speaker. I'm a host, If people see value in what I do, then great. And all I look at now backwards is the pain I felt when my parents died. Both of them died within 3 months of each other. That was really difficult to deal with, really difficult time. I had 3 franchises. They were liquidated. It was incredibly difficult. Prior to that, my pension had been scammed from me. So what I was retiring on, £140,000 at the time, was taken from me, scammed. The business I had, what I'd invested into the franchise all liquidated it. I bought the business back under another name and took every penny I had. So I had no income, no money, no parents, and my mental health was really, really, really poor. And at that point, I couldn't think it could get any worse. And prior to that, I'd had a breakdown because of burnout at work. I was working incredibly hard. And this was the same before about I measured my worth based on what was in the bank. And at that time, negative equity in the house, lots and lots of debt, no way of making an income. I have no purpose in this life. There's no point in being here. Now, looking back, that was the darkest time or the darkest period of my life. Similar to yourself, when you lost your dad, these when things happen, it just feels incredibly unfair. But when we've got a bit of distance between, we can look back at the incident or the trauma in my case, look back at it and go, that was the purpose. I had to go through that to realize that what I do now wouldn't have happened if that hadn't happened. So I'm now living a better life because of the pain that happened. So the more we embrace the pain and lean into it, the clearer it becomes what that purpose is. But I think so many people who have found what they call their purpose will refer to a story when something bad happened in their life and they've dealt with that themselves and they've come through it. And interesting, you talk about the word depression. I've used this word a lot, the word depression. And there's so many people describe it in different ways. And for me, depression is almost like a suppression of your own emotions when you're not brave enough to deal with the truth. And you keep it suppressed for so long, it becomes a manifestation of something even bigger. It's almost like when you don't do the housework or you don't do the pots or you don't do the washing, eventually it becomes a massive beast and it takes over your world. If you just do these little things once in a while and deal with those things as they happen, and I'm talking about feelings and emotions, if you don't deal with them, they're just going to become these massive monsters that will eventually consume you and stop you from doing what you need to do. How do you describe depression?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, say my experience of depression after bereavement. Obviously, I mean, that's a very particular kind of depression. And,
Mm,
that's the one time if somebody came to me that was going through a bereavement, I would say, go see a bereavement counselor because you
mm,
need to process that. We're not going to like turn you in a different direction and, change the course of your life. You've got to experience those emotions. You've got to like process that and go through that. But that experience was compounded, say, by other things, life things, a breakup that should never have been a breakup, but it was, and it just happened in a way that it was
Mm.
never going to happen. It was very unpleasant when it was because of the person in this person's life, and it all just very complicated. And I wasn't strong enough at the time to deal with it. I literally just, as a family, we just
Mm.
buried my dad. It's like
Yeah.
it comes down to that at the end of the day. And then I had to have an operation I didn't need at that time, which I found out when I woke up the next morning. And it was the first winter of lockdown, and I didn't have a home because it was winter and I couldn't live in my van, and it was lockdown. You couldn't live in vans then because
Mm.
I hated van owners. So yeah, it was a really dark time. But one of the things I was going to say was, like, as you were just talking about, like, out of those times, that's where we grow. And I
Mm.
know for me, didn't feel like it at the time. It felt absolutely desperate, really desperate. And what I do remember, I was talking to mum about this. Well, no, yeah, I was listening to one of these I've done previously where we were talking about, it was on resilience and adversity, and it was with another friend of mine who's a coach, and he had 4 heart attacks, lots of, like, really
Wow.
big sort of health issues.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we talk about that, and I heard myself, and I'd forgotten this. And I remember at that time, I think it was maybe in the sort of the early part of 21, and I was in my van at that time. No, sorry, it was the end of 2020. So it was before the operation, but it was around the time I was finding that out. I was going through this weird breakup, like
Mm.
craziness. I was camping in a field with a friend of mine because, I didn't have a home, and going through the early stage of the bereavement. And I was throwing all this NLP at it, just trying to, like, do the stuff that I do now daily, and mindset stuff and all that. But it was like it had nothing to hold on to. There was nothing
Mm.
there for these techniques, tricks, tools, whatever, that work so brilliantly now to stick to. There was just nothing there. And it was such a big realization. And I'm very anti-medication unless, there is other
Yeah.
choice, and obviously in certain
Yeah. Me
scenarios.
too.
But having had 24 years of chronic illness and having meds thrown at me, and they never worked. If they did, it was for a few weeks, and then they become less effective because the body gets used to it, and they
Mm.
get worse because of side effects. So I'm very like that. But I ended up calling the doctor from a field not far from here in Pembrokeshire, actually, and saying I need help because, I'd got to a point where, I mean, I was at the end of myself,
Mm.
you know. And that changed things. It gave me a foundation, which is what I hoped. It started to, the medication, once it started to work, gave me like a bit of a foundation to which I could start, you know, building myself back up from, which just wasn't there before. And then
Mm.
as soon as I was able to, I came off them and,
Yeah.
carried on myself. But I think depression to me, and all my conversations I've had with friends and family over the years, in different ways, is that it is a very unique experience, and someone's depression is not someone else's depression,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I agree.
many, same as purpose, many shapes and forms to it. But I am grateful for the experience now because it enables me to be more empathetic to clients and friends, family, and have that understanding. Um, yeah, yeah, but I think definitely out of those dark times, that's where we grow. And like you, when I look back, one of the most grateful things I'm most grateful for is that my dad saw me fully beyond healthy. Like, there's obviously my mum sees it daily and hears about it, FaceTime, like, Mom, this just happened. Oh, I just climbed this thing, and I'm showing her where I am. Like, I've just come back from a few weeks in Spain before Christmas climbing, and FaceTiming her from the crag and showing her these amazing canyons, and the joy on her face to see all that. And my dad got a lot of that, you know,
Mm.
um, which is one of those things in life I am deeply, deeply grateful for, because that gave him peace, knowing that, at some point when he wasn't going to be around, I would be okay. I
Mm.
was now standing on very much on my own 2 feet.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think, sorry, that always just throws me off it when I just start to talk about that again, because it's really hard, because this is my story, but I always get so, it's so effective to me,
Mm.
affecting to me, that it takes me back there. But yeah, let's get back on track to purpose anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, but I think that's what's going. I'm grateful for that experience, but I also know that if that hadn't happened, perhaps I wouldn't be sat here now. I think I
Mm.
always would have been sat somewhere coaching at some point, but it would have been a different journey.
Yeah.
I'm a different person, you know, um, from that. And yeah, we are where we are, and for good reasons, you know. This
Mm,
is life. I mean, these things happen. People pass away, you know, people, we experience depression, we experience the highs, we experience the lows, and it's how we navigate through that and what we take from it. And I
mm,
actually remember a voice in my head very clearly, and it was around the time where I made that doctor's phone call. Um, Such a bad place. But I remember this very strong voice in my head saying one night as I was couldn't sleep, it was like, I promise you, Alison, you are transitioning into the most, and what that was for me was, you know, the most I've got it written down, I haven't looked at it for a long time, but the most powerful, bravest version of yourself, you know, courageous, all those
mm,
things. And it wasn't me speaking it, it just came into my head. I heard
mm,
myself saying it, like, I promise you, you are transitioning into. So
mm,
even in that darkest time, there was a part of me that knew that this was just the beginning of a new phase. You know, but it's just moving
mm.
through that and trusting in yourself, trusting in the
Yeah,
universe, trusting in the people, your friends, your family around you, that, you know, all those different structures we have.
yeah. What a transition. Well done. And
Thank
well
you.
done for sharing it as well. And I think that's the point of, for me, that's what purpose is you know, you spoke about a point there which is incredibly poignant to it. You visualized it, then you relived it. You know, we relived it with you, listening to you and watching you. You kind of took us there, and you know, and that was a beautiful moment just to hear you to explain that. It was so important to you to remember that it is that transitional point where you were you were at your lowest point by the sounds of things. What you weren't depressed, that was depression, you know, and there's a big difference between the two. You know, being depressed is what we all get. That's we have highs and lows, and that's being human. If we didn't, we just flatline and life would be completely miserable and boring anyway. But depression is that inability to change things around us until there's an intervention. And that intervention could be anything. You know, that could be medication, it could be a voice in our heads, it could be, in my case, somebody passed a note to me and said, I'm not a prophet, but God just told me to tell you this. And they give me some pages of stuff. I'm like,
Okay.
I was thinking that, but I never knew that was them. Don't get me wrong, I'm not massively religious, and I went to church when I was younger and I took the kids to church and stuff. But I wouldn't call myself religious in any way at all. But somebody went, listen, I'm not a prophet, but God just told me to tell you this, and handed it to me. And everything on there has actually happened. You know, and it's almost like that version that you heard, that voice that you heard. You know, you're going to become this powerful person, you know, the best version of yourself. I had no idea what that was. I needed somebody to tell me. I had somebody to, you know, to provide the intervention. Also interesting as well that you vividly recalled the field. I've got a chapter in the book that I'm writing at the moment. It's called The Field. And that's when I went, this is where I end my life. But I end that chapter with, I was ending that life, not my life. And
Mm,
that's the thing. When I say reverse engineer, it's like at that time, I cannot carry on living like this. I need to change something. And I was looking with my eyes wide open for whatever that was. Unbeknown to me, that experience was my purpose. It was all about providing people the opportunity to speak about these experiences in their lives, to get them out, so they're not suppressed within them emotionally, that they actually come out and they can hear those words come out of their mouth and go, ah, there's a light bulb moment. And you must get this a lot when you're coaching people, and you just ask a few questions and your client hasn't answered this before, they've never spoken openly about it, and they hear the words coming out of the mouth and go, I get it now. Thank
yeah.
you for that question. And all it takes is just asking a question. We have to ask questions of ourselves sometimes, and they're the most difficult ones. And it's one of the phrases that a friend of mine used, who was also a coach, is that you can't tickle yourself. So this is when you said, would you like me to coach you? I'm like, of course, because I can't do it myself. I need somebody to get this out of me because I just can't do it myself. And I know what it is, but I just can't reach in there and do it. So will you do it for me, Alison? And that's what you did. And that, you know, as you said, you know, these things are always, they were meant to happen. This conversation was always going to happen at some point. There's no point in forcing it. We started talking 6 months ago about this conversation. I'm like, at some point, you know, it'll be the right time to do it. And that's when it'll happen. There's no point in forcing these things. And I think that sometimes is when we get frustrated. We try and force looking for our voice, our purpose. We look too hard for the answers. When we can't find the car keys, we look everywhere, we go frantic. It's always in the last place we left them. I think it's a bit like that with purpose. The harder we look, the harder it is to find.
Why do you think it is so important for humans to, not every human, obviously, but it is a very common thing. Why do you think it is so important for us to find, know, discover our purpose?
So I'll try and keep this really short.
That's
I
okay.
think the clues in the question.
Mm.
If the question you just asked then about, for humans to find their purpose, that's what makes us human, is to
Yeah.
have a purpose. So that's what humanity is. We have a purpose to support life and to improve life and to improve constantly. That's what evolution is. So that's, to me, that's what purpose is. And if we're not contributing to humanity and the planet, then we're not living our purpose. So I think that to me is a very, very simple version of that. And those people who find it too difficult to have a purpose and they will just attach themselves to what they see around them and go, well, this is what I see on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, or the TV or the news or everything. They're looking outside themselves for that kind of reference. They're the ones who I think are lost. It sounds really easy, but I think it's very difficult to look inside yourself and just find answers in yourself. Hence, this is why having a great mindset coach is imperative at times. I want to share as well, if I can just share something as well. This is, we have a code of conduct in coaching, don't we? We don't share things. So I was your client
Mm.
in this respect, and I don't mind sharing if that's okay with you what that
Go
session was
for it.
about.
It's your, it's your life, your world.
Well, I'm kind of doing your marketing for you and your PR, so I doubt you're going to edit this out.
Oh, no, you crack on there. Take as long as you want. No, I'm kidding.
so
Yeah.
so this is about purpose, and within that session, it was, I get really frustrated when I know what I should be doing, and I'm not doing it. And I get really agitated at times, sitting there doing nothing. Most people I know get bored easily because of the world we live in, and I'm no exception to that. And sometimes sitting there thinking, I know I should be resting, but I feel like I should be doing now. We talked through some techniques, and I know about anchoring techniques, and I've used them in the past, but I needed a new anchoring technique, and I needed a technique to help me stop being anxious all the time. And the anxiety wasn't fear of anything happening; it was fear of nothing happening. It's that fear of being useless and doing nothing. And what I got from that was just be a human being. Just be. Stop doing all the time. And this is how we grow, is that the growth is actually in the rest and recovery phase. It's not in the doing part. It's the reflecting on it. And you took me through a technique which will stay with me forever. And you took me back to a place when I knew I was in the right place at the right time. And that for me that was my purpose. And that was delivering a TED talk in Bollington. And I knew I had to deliver that talk. That was that prophecy I spoke about before. I had to do this. There was nothing else mattered at that point. I just had to deliver this TED talk. And then after that TED talk, it's almost like the metaphorical mountain. Once you've coming down the mountain, it's like, well, now what? This is just boring. There's no mountain to climb right now. So what do I need next? What's next? It's my purpose. It's the recovery phase of that, that hard effort, whether it's delivering a talk or delivering a workshop or um, doing an Ironman triathlon or something like that. The period afterwards is often longer, or the period of recovery is often longer than the period of euphoria for me. So the TED talk was about 15, 16 minutes. The come down afterwards was months. So doing an Ironman took
Yeah.
me a lot longer than I liked it. So 15 and a bit hours. The pain was more like 15 months afterwards of recovery. And that was what was necessary. And that's what I got from that session, is that I've got to learn how to recover. When my brain's frazzled from doing stuff, it needs to switch off and just be human and stop doing things all the time. So that's what I took from that. I don't know if that's what you realized in the session.
No, no, I do. I remember it well. Yeah, I do. I remember that session very well. And I think it's also about trusting that it's not all just come to a standstill, and that, if you're able to just stop and be for a moment, you're going to be ready for the next awesome thing. You
Mm,
talk about TED Talk, and yeah, I'll put a link to that as well so people can watch that as well, because you are an awesome speaker. I've watched it.
stop
Very
it.
inspirational. No, no, you are. Um, and yeah, and then triathlon, or, all these kinds of things, but they're, quite monumental things in themselves. And just that trusting that, again, when it stops, that's not the end. you know, that's
No.
it's
And we've both mentioned death on this, and I think
Mm.
I used to see death as a really dark thing because of what we remember from it when we've experienced those around us, loved ones in particular, who pass away. I reframe it completely differently now. And yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the fact that my parents died meant that I had parents. So there is no death without life, and vice versa. It's the opposite side to the same coin. And I find death now, and I'm not. This isn't a morbid statement. The fact that I know I'm going to die gives me a kick up the ass every day. I know at some point I'm going to die. So I don't want to waste any days. I want to make sure that my purpose is every single day. If it's just one person or if it's 1,000 people, it doesn't matter. I need to live every single day and use that purpose. And this is why I get frustrated at times, thinking it's tea time and I don't feel like I've inspired anyone right now. Now, somebody might have watched a TED talk on YouTube, or somebody might have read a blog that I've posted at something, or somebody might be speaking about a session that we'd had. But I feel like I need to actively help people all the time, and I think that's what purpose is. Sometimes is that it's almost like when you have a gift or a skill and you feel like you need to use it. There's
Mm.
a frustration when you're not doing it. Athletes have the same kind of thing when they're not performing. Maybe, I don't know, mountain climbers might have this thing like, I'm frustrated, I've not climbed a mountain in the last few days, I need to do something right now. It's that purpose. We get itchy feet, we feel like we need to be doing something all the time. And for me, that's what is the opposite side. There's everything's got two sides. So for me, death is actually quite a beautiful thing because it means that I'm alive right now. And that motivates me to live a little bit more. The fact that I've lost people. I lost a friend a couple of days ago. I'm
Mm.
not going to get too emotional right now. It's the second friend I've had in business who's died in the last 12 months.
Oh.
And it was came out of nowhere on both occasions. No idea, why did this happen? They're both way too young. They were both younger than me as well. And I can't get my head around this. It just feels really unfair. And the impact it had on people is massive.
Mm.
I've lost 3 friends to suicide in the last 3 years. I've lost a cousin as well. She was younger than me as well. My mother-in-law died at Christmas. Just we're surrounded by death. But the flip side to that is we're surrounded by life as well.
Mm.
If, the fact that we grieve means that we love somebody in the first place.
Yeah.
That's the point to it. So I find death one of these like strange things that most people fear or avoid thinking about and talking about. But for me, it just motivates me to use my purpose even more, if you like.
That's beautiful, and I'm going to take away a lot from that and share. There's a friend of mine who just did the clinical training, the course that I did, and um, her mother not so long ago passed away, and she's got the
Mm,
funeral tomorrow. So I will be sending her this conversation as soon as I get it edited,
uh,
to hear that, because yeah, it's when you're going through it, obviously, when you're in the midst of it. And I'm so sorry to hear about your friend, and, so recently as well. So thank you for still turning up and doing this today, because
that's okay.
you've been very understanding if you just said, actually, I need some time. But it's good to, it's good to carry on and do things, but also, yeah, when these things happen, as I said earlier, we have to go through it, we have to process it, but to be able to see the beauty in it as well and reframe it in such a beautifully positive way is amazing. And absolutely, like, yeah, like, the idea of, well, again, it goes back to that sunshine and rain thing. I wouldn't know what it is to be loved by my dad and love my dad if I hadn't, had that
Mm,
experience with him, and know what it is to have him not be in my life. But yeah, I would not have had that experience.
mm,
And we learn what we can cope with as well. We learn things about ourselves, and that's another
mm,
positive thing, isn't it? I certainly learned. Mum and I were talking about this just the other night. Um, I I spent my entire life, and I'm not kidding. In NLP, we always challenge people when they say always, and it's like, no, always.
mm,
I always had, from as long as I can remember, this sort of quite almost paralyzing fear that when my mum and father and my brother and his partner now as well, and my niece, but when any of those guys pass away, if it happened for me, I would literally, not literally, throw myself off a cliff, or like I just wouldn't be able to function
mm,
anymore. I
mm,
couldn't see how that would ever be possible. And talk about limiting beliefs and all those kind of things.
mm,
It really smashed it for me in that moment. And it was I said to my mum not so long ago that I would rather have those 24 years back of illness than go through that time again, from the moment, we knew
Wow.
that he passed away to,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'm still grieving now. It's a few years, couple of years, 2 3 years on, nearly 3 years on. So I'm still grieving, but there was a particularly 18 months, 2 years that were desperately, and I would rather have those 24 years back than go through that again.
Mm.
But what I've learned from it and how I've grown and what I've learned about myself, and this is what I was telling my friend who's got this funeral tomorrow, she's very much in that place at the moment. It's too early, it's a few weeks and she's lost and it's just desperate times.
Mm.
But it's like, at some point you will look back and you will realize what you dealt with, how you coped, how and the fact that you are still here and that you can function after these people leave us,
Mm.
and that you learn, you carry forward what you've learned from them. I still hear my dad, I have conversations with him because I know what he'd say. He still lives on within me because I know,
Mm.
I'm like, oh, Dad, don't you think this, blah, 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 blah. And I just hear him, saying, yes, darling. I just hear this
Mm.
like, yes, darling, as in like,
Mm.
of course, you can, yes, darling. Um, but you carry that with you and you grow, you learn so much. And for me, that's where you grow.
Mm.
And again, that's one of the beautiful things to come out of these times of loss, of
Mm.
someone in our life in some way, or even something, like a job that you're like really sad you've lost, you get over it and you move on and you can look back and think, wow, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here now, or I wouldn't have learned all
Exactly.
those things.
Yeah.
Particularly when it's, a human bereavement, that's
Yeah.
really, really tough. And for me, one of the things I do wish is that, daily, I tell my mum, excuse me, like I said, first minute I got off that phone call with you, I was like, FaceTime mum, like, Mum, oh my God, someone thinks I'm worth coaching them. And, they want me to coach them. I miss desperately, or I wish desperately that there's all these things my dad knew. He doesn't know any of this. He
Yeah.
passed away before I had that. What am I doing with my life? Okay, let's stop rock. Well, not stop rock climbing. Let's let's get serious about coaching, make this our thing, and climb
Mm.
in our spare time. But he saw the health transformation. He saw me climbing, but he has, he wouldn't be surprised for a second. He'd be the first person to go, well,
Mm.
yes, darling, of course you were going to do this. It would have been absolutely on the
Yeah.
cards for him.
Yeah.
But other than that, he knew everything, and you have to take those things from it and realize what you've gained from having those
Yeah.
relationships.
And we always believe in our children no matter what, no matter what happens. So your dad would have always had that belief in you no matter what. You didn't even need to say anything. He would have just felt it.
Exactly,
He would have
exactly.
known it anyway.
The
But
Jedi kind of thing.
yeah, and I feel intrinsically connected with my children. They've both moved out now, both at university. And for me, that's more traumatic to me than it is to them. Trust me.
Mm,
That
yeah.
purpose in life is like to be a parent. As soon as it happened, I get it now. That's what I've always meant to be. I was always meant to be a dad. I was
Oh,
always meant to, be dad to Brandon and Kirsten. And I was grieving before they even left. I'm like, I'm not too sure what life's going to be like when they're not even in the same house as me. I can't protect them. That's my purpose. When I can't protect them, there's a part of me missing. It's part of my being and my purpose goes. And I find a lot of people who have, empty nest syndrome, if you like, if it is a syndrome, they try ways of filling that gap, and there are gaps in our lives which emerge when we're not expecting them, and sometimes when we do expect them. I expected Brandon and Kirsten at some point to move out, but I was dreading it. I absolutely loved conversations with them. I just loved being around them, as like any parent would do. Just annoying them and telling dad jokes is just part of what I'm meant to do, but also reassure them that I'm always there for them. But when not in the same building, I was really anxious about that. And when they left, that's when I became a coach. So again, that's that. These key times in our lives, things change, and they're always meant to happen. But I wasn't looking forward to it. So we have a podcast as well. So I'm on a podcast with my friends, Dave Eccles and Phil Birch. It's called Talking Cod. It's nothing to do with fishing, by the way. So just three guys who just talk about stuff. And this is why I'm very open talking about the stuff that goes on inside my head and my heart, for example. It's because we talk about it on a regular basis. So once a fortnight, we'll get together and do a podcast. we had a guest on who was a vicar of a church in Didsbury, and we had a really, I mean, this is deep, but the conversation we had with Nick was on a different level of depth. So there was somebody in his congregation, a teenage girl who took her own life because she was confused about her sexuality, and she didn't feel like she would be accepted in that church because the church frowns upon, anything which isn't straight. Now, that's not actually the truth, but that was her perception. So she took her own life, and it affected everybody in the parish. And we got into a really deep conversation about, the labels that people put on each other and our sense of belonging, sense of identity. So, so deep. This conversation happened less than 2 weeks after I'd lost my mother-in-law, or my wife's mum, Jenny. She'd become my second mum. Now, so I'm in a household where my wife's grieving way more than me. I couldn't show that grief to my wife. It was a really, really difficult time for me as well. But her grief was off the scale. She'd already lost her dad at a very similar time to when you lost your dad, and she just lost her mum at Christmas. So the grief in this house was, the gravity was awful. It was so tiring to be here. So we recorded the podcast pretty much as we're doing right now, and I just, Nick, how do you deal with grief? How do you know? How do you deal with it? And he said, something very similar. It's like, there is no set way of dealing with grief. It's just going to happen. It takes longer for some people, and some things just happen. There'll be times when you want to pick up the phone and go, Dad, you never guess what? I can't make that phone call anymore. When my parents passed away, I remember thinking, I just want to phone my dad up when Brandon did something well at university, or Kirsten did well at dancing, for example. I just want to phone them and tell them that I want you to be proud of me because of what I've become, for example. And that isn't there anymore. So, and Nick said something to me, and I've never heard this before, and I thought it was beautiful. And he said, when somebody dies in our life, or somebody passes away, it leaves a big hole in your life. No, I get that. And people say over time that hole shrinks. And he said, it's not true. That hole never, ever shrinks. That hole will always be that same size. It's that still human being sized hole in your life. But over time, what you'll notice that things start to grow around that hole.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is absolutely beautiful. And I wish I'd heard that maybe 12 years ago when I was losing my parents. I never thought there would be a life after that. And similar to something you spoke about there, there are certain times in our life when we have to pursue our purpose, and certain times we cannot pursue our purpose. And this is a bit like Maslow's theory of hierarchy, if you like. We need stability, we need safety, we need security, we need to be loved, we need to know where we belong. And at that point, we can live our purpose. And if we don't have these things, it's almost impossible to do that. How can I coach and be fully present with someone when I'm grieving? I need that stability. I need to know where I am. And if I can't be fully present as a coach, or delivering a workshop, or recording a podcast, it's not the right time to do it. And I think sometimes, and going back to the coaching session we had, sometimes we try too hard to do what we're supposed to do rather than just be who we're supposed to be.
Amazing. Yeah. And you're making me think as well about, your experience there with your kids. And I know my brother and his partner, Henny's 18 now, and she'll be 19 this year. She's going to be heading off to university soon. And obviously they're still going to be a massive part of her life, but it's that shifting for them as well. And their purpose for 18 years has been, well, one of their reasons for being has been Henny, and and all those things you just said, and that's going to change for them. Yeah. And I was thinking about people that, you mentioned the empty nest syndrome, when they have had a purpose for life, or somebody who's been in, you often hear of people that go into retirement, and they've been in a certain career for many, many years of their life, and then they hit that retirement, they have all these plans, they're going to do all these things, but they end up kind of, obviously not everybody, some people it works for, and they go off and they find their way. But you hear, and I've definitely had I was thinking as well, because it reminded me of a client I had, they get lost, and it's like everything in the world's just come to a standstill, because that output of where they were useful, where they were helpful, where they were needed, or where they could provide value, in whatever shape or form, again, that's disappeared, or it's not acquired in the same way. So for those kinds of people, and this is one of the questions, I was going to come to, is when people are in that place, they find themselves in that place, what advice would you, super coach, have for somebody that's
Yeah.
kind of feeling at that crossroads, can't really see which way to go, feel, perhaps it's, I'm trying to sort of put my finger on it, but that feeling of just, here we go, here's an example. My mum,
Mm.
who is of immense value to the world still, but she's now 83. I know she won't mind me telling you this. I'm going to get her, maybe, if she's up for it, on one of these one day, because she's one of the wisest people I've ever met. And I
Oh
think
yeah, I saw your TikTok video about bread.
about the sliced bread. Yeah.
Yeah.
For anyone listening, I would just quickly explain what that's about. Basically, throughout my life, my mum has reminded me to, when I get overwhelmed or too many things going on, stress, to think about life as that bag of sliced bread. You open the bag, you don't take the last slice out first, you take the first slice and then the second, the third. And that was always one of her metaphors for me.
Love
So
it.
very little video.
This, then that, then that, then
Exactly.
that. Just one thing at a time.
One thing or one slice at a time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So, yes, immensely wise woman, and she was a nurse for nearly all of her life, going way back to her early training, as a early 20-year-old, I guess. That's where she met my dad. So they were together for 60 years, one of those lifelong
Oh.
marriages, and love, loves and all of that stuff. Amazing, goals for me, definite goals.
Mm.
But yeah, she was a nurse throughout her life in different ways, different shapes and forms, midwife. And then she was a practice nurse in a practice where we lived for some years. She was a smoking cessation advisor, one of the very early ones, those types of people.
Yeah.
She went into counselling and became a trained counsellor. So her entire life, she served, she gave value.
Yeah.
Obviously, she was our mum as well. And she, I'm very blessed. My brother and I are very blessed to say she's one of those mums that was like absolutely, again, I don't even know what words to describe it. That means a dad as well. Very,
Mm.
very blessed with those guys. But she's now 83. Dad's passed away. He's no longer here. She had a head injury some, I guess, 25 years ago now. So
Mm.
mobility issues from that,
Yeah.
and then age and all those kinds of things as well, and other health issues. So she now, my brother and his partner, beautifully, when my father passed, literally the first night, took her back to their home. They moved from London to Sussex some years ago, with that thinking that one day, they,
Mm.
a beautiful house, but with space, a garage. But one day, a grandparent, we didn't know who, might well end up, that would be somewhere that they would turn
Yeah.
place. And my brother's partner's she's retired now, but she's an architect. So, this has all been in the thinking, but it's now happened. We're in that place, and it's mum. So she's now, living with them, and the world for her has completely changed.
Mm.
Her, her her purpose is very different. It's reminding me of another lady,
Mm.
nun, friend of ours, who spent her entire life serving her community and her church.
Mm.
Very beautiful woman. And then when she hit, that age of life where she couldn't do that anymore, depression kicked in for her.
Mm. Yep.
Because she felt she was not of value. She couldn't
Yep.
serve, she couldn't do what she'd been doing all her life. With my mum, though, she gets on Zoom calls with something called Headway, which is like, a Zoom support, well, an organization for people with head injuries, and they have
Yeah.
meetings.
Oh, okay.
And she was telling me that, she gets all awkward and embarrassed and laughs about it. She's like, they call her like the wise one or something on the group, and she's the woman that, my friends, when I was growing up, my friends would come round to do homework. And I'd be like, where are they? And I'd go out to the kitchen and they'd be sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea with my mum, telling her all their problems. She's been that person throughout her entire life. And she feels now, I know this because we've obviously talked lots about this,
Mm.
but what can she do to be of value? She feels useless, like there's nothing
Mm.
she can offer because she's so limited.
Yeah.
Actually,
Mm.
just changing what that is, and I have no idea what it's like to be that age and be in that position. And one day, if I'm lucky enough to be alive long enough, I will know. But trying to, say to mum, you are immense value. The wisdom
Mm.
she's still giving and sharing to people in her head injury community, to me, to my family, She meets people on the street. She goes out on a scooter. She ends up having, she's always having
Wow.
random conversations. There was a woman in a church not so long ago,
Mm,
and she went in. It was one of the first times she'd gone out after COVID. You know, she was able to sort of like venture a little bit further. She's obviously very, very careful because, you know, age and health and stuff. But she ended up having a conversation with a woman, and my mum will talk to everyone in any queue, anywhere. And this woman, I can't remember the exact, somebody had just passed away very, very recently, you know, with very, very near to that person. And they were on the edge of, you know, thinking about not being here anymore. And my mum sat and talked to her for, you know, a long time. They ended up meeting up after, you know, later and stayed in touch. I was like, Mum, you know, like if you've not been there, you know,
mm.
you don't know. Maybe somebody else
Yeah,
along, but
sounds
that's
like an inspiration.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
going back to that thing of people that are getting to those points in their life where, you know, it could be, you know, in their 40s, but their kids are about to like disappear off to college, and it's like, oh God, well,
Mm,
where do I now, where can I now help, and who am I, who am I giving whatever that is that I can help with value, whatever that is,
yeah,
or has ended a career, retiring, or someone like my mum. What kind of like, it's a tough one, you know, it's like it's a big thing, but somebody that's in that place of feeling lost, because I feel like that's
yeah.
probably the
Mm.
worst.
I think for the first thing to reflect on there, like your mum's an inspiration. Um,
Yeah, she is.
and I think there's, you know, because of the situation she's in now, she's found a way to be valuable to other people because of what's happened. If you like, on that Zoom call, she wouldn't be on the Zoom call adding value to other people if that hadn't happened. So that kind of demonstrates it as well. And the
Yeah,
fact that I've seen your TikTok video today means that she's still adding value through
I
you,
know, right?
and that's the thing. So
I just wish she knew it and like really truly knew it. And it's obviously not the same as a lifetime of nursing and that. And you don't, you know, you feel
these
like
like
you can.
they're like ripples, aren't they? Like, you know, so that ripple has an effect on other people,
Yeah.
and that carries on, and that goes on to the next person, the next person. Um, so I don't give advice. The only people I give advice to are my kids when I have to just tell them, look, don't go into your overdraft because it'll end up costing you a lot more money in the long run. You know, make sure you stay on top of your cleaning, otherwise you'll get ill. Make sure you drink a lot of water, else you're going to get poorly, and then you won't be able to study. You
Oh,
know, so
great
so
advice.
sometimes there'll be stuff like that. You know, I will give
Yeah,
advice
yeah,
to my kids.
yeah. Life advice.
I never coach my kids. Well, I used to do, but then they hate it.
Yeah.
Dad, I'm not one of your clients, so don't coach me. Um, when it comes to giving advice, I'm very sparse with advice unless I feel like it's absolutely necessary and that person wants me to give it, or I just go, can I have permission to tell you what I think, what I would do in this situation, or what I've seen that has worked. I couldn't possibly give advice to somebody who's more experienced in life than me. So I couldn't do that to somebody who's a retiree, for example, because I've never been in that situation. So who am I to give advice on that other than get them to reflect on what they've seen from people who've, you know, outlived them, for example, you know, what do they see? And often there's this what I don't want and what I want. And we spend so much time avoiding what we don't want, not enough about what we want to do. So this dials back into value. So what I tend to suggest is, what does the word retirement mean to you?
Mm.
Now, to me, I don't have many fears, but the only fear I can think of that really keeps me awake at night will be of being of no use to anybody, to being useless. That's my biggest fear in life. That's when I know that there's no point in having a life, and I think that's why people hit that precipice moment of going, "What's the point in being here? Because I'm adding no value. I'm just a burden." And I think that's the biggest fear that people have when they get to retirement age. And the word retirement to me means that you are no longer of value. So there's an association with that word retirement. So when people talk about, I can't wait to be retired, I'm like, wow, why do you want to be retired? Why do you want to be useless? When you say retirement, do you mean I'm looking forward to doing this instead of that? That's a different mindset.
Yeah.
So retirement means I'm retiring from my paid job, but I'm going to move into this phase of my life when I can do more cooking or more working with community or spend more time with my grandchildren or, do something for other people. I've always wanted to volunteer. So when I've stopped working, I'm going to do this. So there's this three-phase life that we've kind of created. We've created a system that creates a three-phase life, and it's never meant to be like this. It's not, it's unnatural. We look at the places around the world in the blue zones where people live the longest, in Sardinia and Greece and Ikaria and Okinawa, Japan, for example, Loma Linda, California. People live there the longest because they know their purpose. That's it. There's no science behind it. You can look at the science in it, but the science behind this would just tell you that people who have a purpose will live longer because their brain tells them you need to do something. And once the brain's functioning, the body follows it, and the brain continues to work, and it does things. So these people live beyond 100 years old. They realize that they've got a purpose in their community and in their family. And as soon as they stop having that purpose, they're ready to die. So this whole thing about the three-phase life that we've created, you're a child and you're in education, in which case you're taking from a system. Then you're working, in which case you're contributing to the system, and then you retire, and then you're taking from the system again. We've created this awful system where we feel we're only of value when we're working. Now, I know that's not true, but a lot of people who are listening to this will probably have that feelings like child, adult, retired, useless, useful, useless. I don't ever want to be useless. So retirement to me, and I think this is like in Okinawa, Japan, for example, if you were to say to somebody, "Are you retired?" It's a really, hurtful question. That kind of says you're of no use to anyone anymore. So that's what retirement to me means. It means pointless. So when it comes into the later phases of life, what I would like to suggest, and this is why I became a coach as opposed to having a job, I can do more of the things that I know I'm really good at. And I've got the confidence to say, I know I'm really good at this. I need to be doing more of it. My previous job, I couldn't do it. I've tried to find a job where I want to do this, and I just can't do it. So I have to leave that job and do more of what I'm meant to do in my life. And that's it. And that becomes becoming a coach, becoming a mentor, to deliver workshops on finding your voice and finding your purpose, for example. I have to do that, and I can't do that when I've got a job. So I'm never going to retire. So if I'm a 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old person delivering workshops and doing public speaking or going on walks and runs with people or just creating an environment where people can come together, that's my purpose. So I'm never going to retire. So in terms of what advice would I give to people is just, what do you want to do? What are your skills? What are you good at? What does the world need? And how can you be paid? And I don't mean paid in money. I mean, what do you get in return for doing what you do? Satisfaction, fulfillment, legacy. Somebody cooks for you, buys you a cup of tea. I don't know. But for me, that's what it's all about. As soon as we have no value to anybody, what is the point? It's a bit hard, that, isn't it?
No, I agree. No, you're right about the advice. I think I was kind of meaning, more insight, that. So I probably should have used that word instead of advice, because you're right that we say, let's give advice to my mom or someone like that. But it is those insights into and exactly how you've just reframed it. Essentially, you can see it as an opportunity. You've created space. If it is in terms of a retirement thing, you've created space. Now you can do all those things that you love, but it's changing it into something that's positive. So no, that's brilliant. And I just think that there's definitely, well, it's an opportunity, isn't it? You can just disappear, and you might for a while. You might just feel lost for a little while, and all of that kind of stuff. But it's like, what do you, what to look for? And this is what I didn't know. And I think I was desperately just like, I would go through phases of just feeling like almost like lost at sea, like literally that. And I was lost at sea in a very big, dark, chronic illness sea, obviously as well. And I am definitely somebody that's so passionate about things. So, I know that, I could feel things for things. But I think for me now, it's like, what is it that gets me out of bed in the morning, really happy and excited? What is it that like makes me want to go to sleep? And when I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about my next day, the clients I'm going to be working with, the calls I'm going to have, the podcast I'm going to make, thinking about those and doing my my visualizing of those and all that kind of stuff. But waking up in the morning excited and just like, let's go, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So if I'm going to put you on the spot, because you did that with me earlier, what is your purpose?
Oh, helping others dissolve, or enabling. I prefer the word enabling others to dissolve whatever it is that's holding them back in their life, whatever way, shape, or form that is for them. Kind of like their version of my wheelchair. Like just block, and whether it's a limiting belief or a phobia or trauma or an anxiety, or already in a really good place. Like when I met you, you were in a really good place. There was just something you needed tweaking so that you could excel excel even better in what you were doing, and then go on to become even more effective in what you're doing.
Yeah, I remember that networking event, because I've not been. It was an FSB networking event, wasn't it?
Yes, yes,
I remember that. And my colleague at the time, because I had a job, Gemma, she was on the networking event. She said, "We need a speaker for tomorrow morning." And she contacted me at 5 o'clock at night saying, "Can you speak about mentoring?" I went, yeah, of course. Yeah, I love speaking about mentoring. Yeah, absolutely fine. And the following morning, I delivered a talk about mentoring, where it actually turned out to be more about mental health than it was about mentoring.
yes, it did. Yeah,
And that's how we spoke. And the feedback was phenomenal. And I think they're the things we talk about. Purpose, for example, that was always going to happen. Somebody sometime was going to say, "Tell me about how does mentoring and mental health work together." It was always going to happen, and I was more than happy to talk about that. And that's how we met. So,
yeah.
Gemma gave me a LinkedIn testimonial, and you got a client.
I mean, I think with you though, like when I met you, I was very much new, as you know, to starting all this stuff, was learning about virtual networking and the world of that, and I was just starting to see
Mm,
that. But you just stood out to me. I mean, your talk was awesome, and obviously then knowing, I think I did know that already because you probably would have told me in the session that little story about how that was very quick. And I looked at watched your TED talk as well. But just in that session, you just stood out as somebody that was really speaking from the heart. And I was very drawn to that. And there was something about you and the way you talked. I was like, I wanted to have a one-to-one
mm,
with you, and then you wanted to have a discovery call anyway. So it was like,
mm,
and it all worked out, and that's great. But um, yeah, and you were definitely going through that transformation at that time, and
mm.
that speaks to me
Yeah,
as somebody who, I call myself a transformational coach. That is that purpose. It's like helping that person go from here to here in whatever way that is for them.
yeah,
Massive like life, somebody trying to get out of a toxic relationship so that, whatever, or it might just be, as I say, somebody that's like, I'm a mentor, but I want to be a coach.
mm,
Something,
mm,
doesn't matter. It's like it's those limiting beliefs, those blocks, those narrations in our head, and
mm,
perhaps another time, you'll come back and we can have another conversation about that kind of stuff, about those, the mindset stuff more so that we
mm. Well,
talk.
that's your expertise, isn't it?
Yeah, but no, sure. I mean, it's yours as well, but like just that
Yeah,
whole,
I'd love to. Yeah,
blocks, beliefs,
yeah.
and ways of thinking, the narrations, and those things that hold us back in our life, and really what they actually are when it boils down to it. Because,
Mm,
um, yeah, I mean, that was, yeah, it was awesome in that session working with you and seeing that change. And I'm, very proud of you, and having watched, it feels weird to say, like very proud, but I'm, proud to see like what you've made of like what you do, and that you do go out there every day, but you do speak from the heart, and I love that. You just speak,
thank
there's
you.
no frills, there's no agenda. It's just like, it's what I do,
It's strange that I've a series of workshops that I run for a client, and it's called Speaking from the Heart. And
Yeah,
I've got a talk called Speaking from the Heart. Why do I speak from the heart? And
yeah,
it always gets great feedback, because it's exactly what we're talking about now. Why I speak from the heart? Well, because it's my purpose, and that's your purpose as well. Our purpose as human beings is to speak from the heart, not from the head. But I
true.
like,
And
oh,
sorry,
God,
no, go on, Karen, sorry.
no, that's it. I've done.
I was
Go
going to
on.
say my other purpose is the other half of what I do actually, and that's telling the story. And I think that was the other like clicking into place moment for me. I
Mm,
wasn't doing that to start with. So around the time we met, I was just rocking up to like networking meetings going, "Hi, I'm Alison, I'm a coach." I'm not even sure what I said I specialize in then, or if I did. And I'd say, "This is what I do, blah, blah, blah." And it was a little while before, I would start to sort of bring in the story, but that is obviously my why. This is my why. So now I
mm,
say, "Hi, I'm Alison. I'm a mindset coach. I specialize in transformational coaching. And there's a very good reason I'm a coach. And that is because when I was 17, blah, blah, blah." And then I have this is my 2-minute elevator pitch thing. But it is that, like, that's my why. I've walked the
mm.
walk and now talking the talk. But part of the talking the talk bit is not just the coaching. I've had all the training to do that, and done some very, very, very in-depth, full-on, years worth of clinical training with that. But it's the telling the story. So I
Yeah,
web podcasts, I do radio shows, podcasts. As many, I'm doing a lot now as well. But to spread that knowledge of what is possible when you harness your, as I say, your beautiful brain, your magnificent
mm,
mindset. That's purpose, because if one person hears it and I never hear from them, but it just shifts something in their mind of like, God, they were able to do that. Well, I wonder what I could do. Or if they come and have a conversation with me about that, but I never coach them, or I end up coaching them. It doesn't matter. It's
yeah,
like, telling it.
yeah. That really resonates, and it reminds me of the Simon Sinek talk. That starts with why, how great leaders inspire action. The book. It's a top recommendation. We're going back probably about 14 years now since that talk was out, and it's possibly my favorite TED talk, for many reasons. The way he delivers it without technology and a flip chart and a pen delivers one of the best TED Talks you've ever seen. It was just unbelievable. And it's not just because of the content in that TED Talk, it's he completely believes in what he's talking about. His microphone breaks halfway through, doesn't care, just picks up from the microphone, carries on. That's his purpose. He has to deliver this talk. That's it. There's no nerves. He's just, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it. And a lot of people know, I've heard this talk, listened to it, watched it, and read the book. But what you've just articulated makes perfect sense, because it starts with why. That's what it's all about. And the reason why you and I started speaking in the first place is because this is why I do what I do. I was in a wheelchair, and then I fixed myself with NLP. How I did that was this way, and this is what I do now. So if you'd said, I'm a coach, a lot of people would have gone, not interested. As soon as you said, this is what happened, this is my purpose, people are like, oh, tell me more. And I think that's, people gravitate to the why more than the what or the how. And that's what I loved about your elevator pitch, because that's what it was. It was an elevator pitch. You know, this is why I do what I do. This is how I do it. Oh, by the way, I'm a coach.
And
I'm in.
now I get to pay it forward, which I now add in because I love that sense of paying it forward. And I was recently realizing, oh, that's what I'm doing. You know, that's what I do. If I'd have got well and then gone off, you know, as I did, went off and, you know, did a lot of rock climbing, got a job, you know, and just had a really good time for a while and figured out that, yeah, oh my God, I actually am well. This is saving. This isn't like, you know, I'm not dreaming this. If I had just then gone off and did what I was going to do when I was 14, you know, go and get my kayak and my dog and go and live in the Rockies and be a rock climbing instructor, awesome. You know, nobody would have said, oh no, you should be like getting out there and telling a story. But like, yeah, go live your life. And that would have been awesome. But for me, as you know, the coaching thing was always there, ticking away. And then it was like, oh, hang on, now I get to also use this platform to tell the story. And I would have loved to have had that conversation, or a conversation with me 20, 25 years ago. And the fact that on top of that, it's no hardship. You know, if I was doing this every day, going, oh God, I hate this, and oh no, and I'm having to tell us, you know, it's like, no, go do something else, you know, because it's not true, it's not real. But I'm like, I tell it. I do that elevators pitch sometimes, you know, easily sometimes 20 times a day if I'm doing
Really?
well, if I'm
Oh,
doing
wow.
like networking, but not every day.
Wow.
But it depends. But I'm telling that story now at least 2 or 3 times a week, either in a podcast or radio show or on an event or something, or my own thing, or and every time it feels as the first time, and it feels as I'm passionate about it as, like, you know, this is my experience, and you know, if you want to hear it, great. If it doesn't work for you, then great. But I'm going to tell it, and that for me is like, it's using it now, isn't it? Using that history to, you know, and that, yeah, that is definitely.
I think that, I mean, to me, that articulates purpose really well too, because you've gone from an experience from serving yourself into that experience to serve others. You know, I can now just go kayaking and rock climbing because I love doing it.
Yeah,
Or I can tell people about my transformation and serve others as a consequence of my experience,
yeah.
which is the same action that happened before, but your interpretation of how to use that, either for yourself or for others, creates the purpose.
Yeah, and you don't know at the time. I mean, I never, you know, especially when I was ill, obviously I never knew this was going to happen. It seemed like, I mean, that literally would have seemed like a miracle. Obviously now I know it's just neuroscience, my brain and neurology and neuroplasticity and all this amazing stuff that
We
I
make it sound so
know.
easy. Just
Just,
the hardest thing you've ever done in your life was that.
well, I say,
But
I don't want to say to you that it's the hardest work I ever did, but it's the best
yeah,
work I ever did.
yeah,
But you know, like now it's like, oh my God, like I actually can coach people, but also there is a world of virtual stuff, and there's people that are doing these kinds of things, and we can spread this stuff. You know, you can
yeah,
do it. You did your TED talk. You're doing your version of it. You're being on my podcast today talking about your story. You know, it's like, it's the same. It's going to touch people in different ways. You know, like I'm going to send it to that friend of mine of what you're talking about bereavement. It's like, yeah.
yeah. And I think that's exactly what, when somebody asks me to help them find their purpose, we go through that process almost as you've just done now. Is we will look at the things. What do you enjoy doing now? You know, what is it you love to do? When do you feel that you're most alive? And it's usually when they feel closest to death, which I find it is like when I'm doing something really scary, I feel most alive then. And then, so what do you enjoy? What are you really good at?
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually really
Yeah.
good at coaching and sharing that story as well. what does the world need? The world needs to hear these stories and find evidence that you can get well. And what can you get paid for? Well, if you're going to pay me to coach it, then that's happy days. So that is your ikigai right there, without even thinking about it. You don't need a coaching session. You know it already. But many people who I work with at the moment who don't know their purpose, they get lost. They go on this, they start climbing a corporate ladder, or they go down this path,
Yeah.
and then they forget why they've even got on the ladder, or why even went down that path in the first place. And sometimes we have to look backwards and go, well, do you remember when you jumped on the ladder? What were you thinking? Well, I wanted to do this. Well, why? What did you enjoy about it? And then they find, particularly senior leaders in business, they'll find this thing where I loved doing this part of the job, like it was in education. I loved teaching children. I love to see that transformation in children. But now I'm a business manager in a college. I don't even speak with children anymore. I don't even know why I do it anymore. They become miserable, but they're motivated by that next level.
Yeah.
But they completely lose, they lose tact, they lose their purpose because they've gone down a path which is taking them off course. Usually money, status, power, something else. So never ever forget that, Alison. Remember that, your skills you're a great coach. I'm testament to that. The world needs your story. So do share that. And in terms of value, yeah, you're absolutely worth it. You're worth whatever value you want to put on that. Or more importantly, whatever value other people put on that as well. That's something that I tend to do. If somebody can't afford to pay me, I'll just mentor them. I'll do it ad hoc, and we'll do it light touch. We'll just have a conversation, and once in a while, we'll touch base. And how did you get on with that project to set you, or that action to set you? And that's payment to get feedback from people, just to go, I've just had the best evening cooking with my daughter. I've not done this for years. Or I've had the best weekend of my life because I spent some time with my friends again. It's because you got me to answer those questions. And often they'll come back and recommend me to somebody else to be a coach.
Yeah.
So I don't do it for money. So, and I think this is actually still my purpose. I can mentor people, or I can coach them. I will use the skill set as a coach, or I can mentor them as a friend, and just share the experience with them. And I think that's the thing. I talk about ikigai quite a lot on purpose. I think there's, we have to be kind to ourselves. We can't just be, as you said, just volunteers all the time, and people who are doing it for free. We've got to understand, what do we want, how do we want to get paid, and what can I get paid for? And sometimes if somebody comes back to you and said, you shared a story with me a few months ago and it's changed my life, that in itself is payment to you as well. So don't ever change what you're doing, because you're definitely on the right path.
Yeah, likewise, buddy. I mean, it's very clear. Honestly, it was very clear to me when we first met as well. That, you absolutely embody it. God, no, it's amazing. I just, look at the time. We had that conversation at the beginning of this. Like, what was
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like half an hour. You're going to tell me it's more like 2
Well, we were
hours.
saying, what was it, like 30 minutes, 50 minutes, or something like that? You were saying they got 1 hour, 25 minutes.
No
But
way.
yeah,
Well, there's 2 episodes here at least,
I
maybe
know.
3.
Yeah, but I was just, I think it's been of value to me to just, to explore it for myself as well. It's something that I'm living now, and I'm very conscious and grateful for being where I'm at. And I'm very, very eternally, I say at the end of my talk that I give, there's a slide that always comes up, and I cannot get past this slide without breaking into like choke, not crying, but tears. And I think it was last week or the week before, I gave the talk 5 times, and in 2 days it was 4 times. And even at the end of that, the 4th one, I hit this slide, and I have to stop and go, okay, guys, I'm just going to pause for a second, because I cannot look at this. I have to not look at. It's just pictures of me rock climbing and mountain biking and looking very, very fit and healthy. It's like a montage. So it's a really powerful slide for me, because I've just told the whole story, and now it's like, and now for the best slide of all. And then the line that goes with it is that it's a wonder for me that this slide only exists because of my brain's amazing ability to change, full stop. And I get chills and I get emotional. So yeah, I think, oh man, there's so much more we can talk about, but yeah, like to be able to explore this kind of stuff as well, like, even when it, it's a lovely thing to sort of look around what that is and what it means, and really check in with it. And yeah, so just to sum up, I think for me it is that thing of, it's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and it's giving value in whatever way I can. And it's something that means something to me. And obviously, as you know, and listeners know me, my journey and my transformation means more than I could ever possibly put into any kind of words. So that's what for me, purpose is. There's probably many more things as well, but I think those are my three. Like,
Yeah.
especially like getting out of bed in the morning. So what would your kind of like nutshell, you know,
What, my purpose?
well, yeah, how would you summarize, just to sort of like summarize what it really comes down to for you?
It's just all about being of service to people.
Yeah,
That's all it is. It's using what experience or skills we've got to help other people. That's what purpose is for me.
awesome. Hey mate, thank you so much. This has been really, yeah,
I
great.
know. Who's going to invoice who?
Are we not just like giving each other our value here?
It's a live therapy session. That's what it is.
Yeah, yeah,
Loved
absolutely.
it. Loved it. Thanks for asking me on. Really enjoyed this today. And I'm sure we're going to do something like this again in the future.
I would love to have you back on to do. We'll find another topic that we resonate on. I'm sure we will touch on all these things again because they all kind of cross over into each other.
Yeah.
Like we spent,
Sport, athletics.
yeah,
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 let's do it. Living in a van, all that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
yeah. Like bereavement, I'm sure. Like I think any conversation about bereavement tends to come up because it's. I think as we grow older as well, there's more bereavement around us, isn't there?
Yeah,
It's just part of life. But
naturally.
yes, thank you so much. So just once again, just tell everyone your website, how to find you, how to connect with you, and how they find I was going to say the TED Talk and Talking Cod. Can they find that through your website or?
Yes, there's a link on my website. So the website is moderado, moderado.co.uk. If you type in Andy Hall TEDx, there's probably, I think there's only two of us. So, that you can find me on YouTube doing that. We've also got a podcast called Talking Cod. That's on all platforms as well. It's almost as good as this one. So plenty of ways to find me. And obviously on LinkedIn. I don't do a great deal on social media other than LinkedIn now. But yeah, if you want to reach out, feel free. Let's have a chat.
Amazing. So people can connect with you and say want to have a chat and
Yeah, sure.
have a conversation with you if
Absolutely. Yeah.
people, like resonate or would like to talk to you about something, and who knows, kind of thing. But yeah.
If I can help.
Yeah, and same here as people who know and follow me know that I'm always open for conversations. Love to chat about this stuff, and Annie and I are both here for those kind of
Yep. If you're serious about making change, we're the people to speak with.
things. That did not sound cheesy at all.
Well rehearsed. I typed it out before we had this conversation.
I love it. Well, thank you. Honestly, thank you so much. This has been better than I could imagine. I knew it'd be good, but it's right. It was the right time as well because I've been sort of like just bringing this. I'm starting to really get this back off the ground now. But when we first spoke, I was like, I really want to speak to you. It just was like at some point, but please, can we do this? And you've been so patient, and I'm grateful for you for still, just being like here, showing up.
Cool. Thanks for asking.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And yeah, and thank you to everyone for listening and watching. And yeah, this is going to be on, if you're watching on YouTube, this is also going to be on my podcast channel as well. And if you're listening on my podcast channel, this will also be the video on YouTube as well. So yeah, we hope you enjoy and get some value from this and it resonates on some level. So yeah, thank you. And thanks again, Andy.
Thank you. Take care.
Look after yourself.
See you.
Bye. Bye.